All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Coding with Callie meetup. Doug, thank you for being our guest speaker on such short notice today. Go ahead and take it away whenever you're ready.
Sweet. All right, let me share my slide deck. All right.
Oh, Doug, before you get started, do you want questions while you're talking, or do you want people to wait until after if they have questions?
Um, if you have something that works, feel free to jump in. It'll be pretty conversational, I think, but we'll have lots of time at the end as well for like any questions at all. So,
I have your poll
yes.
ready too, so let me know when you want me to launch your poll.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we can do that. I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Doug Svendsen. It's really nice to meet you, and I want to thank you for taking your time to join me today. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about your background, this role, and if it might be a good mutual fit. Or that's something that you might hear me say like the first time you're chatting with me on an interview. Um, my talk today is about interviewing, like the interview itself, actually. So there's a lot of things surrounding hiring and whatnot. And I'll hold on. I want to get to that first. There's a lot of things in the interview process that I'm not going to be talking about. Um, like the importance of building a diverse hiring pipeline, writing accessible job descriptions, hiring for the right level for the role that you need, um, building the necessary interview pipeline to get the information that you're really interested in, that'll help you find out if someone's a great fit for you. Um, Balancing conversational style over like consistency across interviews, things like that. On the interviewing side, preparing for interviews, networking, resume, cover letter, finding open roles, all of that stuff I will not be talking about, but we can totally talk about it after this. Happy to cover anything. But yeah, a little bit about me. So like, who am I? Um, I've spent 18 years in the software industry now. My first 14 years was as an engineer. I've worked at corporations, startups, a startup that turned into a corporation that has startup tendencies. So I've kind of been all over the map with different organizations. I've seen a lot of hiring practices and have a lot of experience doing a lot of different things there. For the past 4 years, I've spent those in engineering management. I'm also a small business owner. I've conducted a lot of interviews. I have interviewed, and I care a lot about stuff. So that's why I want to talk about interviewing. Um, Particularly, I don't I don't love the stigma of interviews in our industry and like how necessarily how we approach them in some cases. And so my hope here at the end of this talk is that um, you yourselves will have some ideas walking into an interview in terms of like um, how to make it go well, how to make everybody feel great. We're all both interviewers and interviewees. Over the past year, I interviewed, I was hired, and I also hired 7 roles this year. So, if we're gonna improve the process, like we can just talk about both sides. And
Important question though. Who
yeah,
is your favorite person that you have hired this year? And be careful because Morgan is on this call too.
uh, Jeff.
Fair.
Not that Jeff, a different Jeff.
I feel that he's pretty cool.
I am actually stoked about everybody who's joined our team this year. It's pretty incredible, actually. Um, so yeah, what are we talking about tonight? I'm going to be talking about the interview. So how we show up for our new team member in our first conversation. So my concept is essentially like someone you talk to is going to be your new team member. This is going to be the first conversation you likely have with them unless you know them previously. And really the easiest thing to do is to walk into it approaching everybody that way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like what's going on when we're walking into when we're building up to an interview, right? So we've got two roles in an interview. We've got interviewee, we've got interviewer. So what's surrounding the interviewee? Like what's their emotional state? What has been happening like leading up to an interview? Similarly, as an interviewer, what's going on with the interviewer? Like what's their daily life like, depending on like which interview they're giving? Like what are they coming into that meeting with essentially, right? Um, and then I'll also be talking about like what are we trying to accomplish in the interview? Why do we do this? And yeah, as I said, why am I talking about this? Because we're all interviewers and we're all interviewees at different times in our career, right? If you're early on, maybe you're not involved in the interview process on the interviewer side, but it's great to know about, and I always encourage everybody to get involved because I think it's the easiest way to start demystifying some of like what's going on with it. Already talked about what we're not talking about. So yeah, let's run a poll, Callie. So our first poll is, have you ever had a negative interviewing experience?
Also, so sorry because I
Oh,
made
they're both there.
questions. I
Yeah,
told
that works too. Have you ever
okay.
conducted an interview at all? Yeah, just to so Callie can share those for us when she gets them. Um, but while we do that, let's talk about our roles. So here we have our super futuristic interviewer image that ChatGPT provided for us. And what's the goals of the interviewer? So there's a couple different roles as interviewer. So you've got and like there's a lot of different roles, but I think the like distinctions in terms of how we approach it, there's some pretty key ones. So you've got your recruiter role. So they're going to have some goals. We've got hiring manager. That's a different set of goals. It'll probably be like a different interview style between those two potentially. And then you've got your interviewing team. So like getting into the technical side of things and whatnot. And they'll have another set of goals as well that's slightly separate. And they're going to be helping the hiring manager um, with the decision-making process and like providing information and whatnot. So, goals of an interviewer, you want to collect details about the experiences of the interviewee to share with the hiring manager, right? So, this is all about trying to, go deep and understand in this really short period of time, like what their experience is in this certain aspect of the interview that you're covering. You're also there to represent the company and culture. So everyone that steps into an interview is like the frontline ambassador for whatever organization you're working at. And I'm not sure everybody thinks of that when they're walking in. Like that's often the only experience we have with some organizations is our interview experience with them, and it can really paint a positive or negative light on the organization itself.
It's scary coming into a company and then doing interviews so quickly. Like, how
Uh,
do you embody the company and culture being at a company for such a short period of time?
yeah, it depends on your comfort level. But ideally, if you have like a really good hiring process, one that includes the culture and whatnot, like you're already bringing those into the organization. And so turning around and being able to represent that should be more straightforward. But if not, it's really like working. working with the company core values if they have them, or like talking to the recruiting team who will have like a really good kind of vision around this and how you should approach it if you need support, essentially. Good question. Um, Other goals of the interviewer. So you're assessing if the interviewee will be successful in the given context of the interview. So we'll talk about like a few different interviews that kind of build a big picture of success, which is what you're trying to understand, right? So different organizations will have different things that they touch on, but really it depends on the role. And so um, that's also a really good way to think about it. And I think as interviewees, it's a really good way to think about it as well. And because it takes a little bit of the load off that you might be feeling when you're walking into an interview. It might not be the right job for you. It's not a judgment upon like you and your skill set and your success and whatnot. I've been turned down for plenty of roles, right? And it's just you have to trust that they're going to have a better view into what they need as an organization. And so um, everyone I've talked to as an interviewer, I think is like fantastic. It's super fun to hear about folks' backgrounds and whatnot. They just might not be either the right fit for what we're looking for right now for a role and team, or they might not be um, to the bar yet for this specific role where I don't think they'd like come into an environment and be successful, which is really important. You don't want to do that. Um, All right. So the context around the interviewer. Um, if if you're the recruiter, it's your job, right? Like that's your full-time job. You're really great at it. You get hired for it. And but your workload might be pretty heavy, especially if it's like a hiring push and whatnot. And so there can be some pressures there. But generally, they're very good at this. As a hiring manager, again, there's probably some pressure and drive to hire for the team. You're doing a lot of interviews, more than the rest of the team potentially, um, because you are doing screening calls and you're kind of the first gate, if you will, of talking to folks. So you talk to more people, and so that might be going on. So like when I'm hiring, I generally make it my focus as a hiring manager. I think it's my top priority. But I can get like a little bit exhausted by it, but myself keeping that in mind, and some of the things that I'll talk about later here is like making sure that I'm bringing that energy and like positivity to every interview because everybody deserves to like get the best, in my opinion.
Do you feel like there is like any sort of like benefit or disadvantage to like how long for like the interviewee, how long the role has been posted for, and like how many people you've interviewed? Like, are you fatigued by the end where like maybe your bar is lower or is your bar higher because you've seen all these people now, or is like there no correlation there?
I would say no, no-ish. It depends. I
I love it. It depends.
Yeah, like I get bummed, right? Like I'm excited to find the person and like you start to if a job has been posted for a long time, one, as an interviewee, don't be hesitant to apply. Like apply because you don't know what's going on. And as a hiring manager and a recruiter, you start to think about um, okay, what does the job description say? Like, what are our questions? What are things like that? Because we're not getting the correct people in. Like, ideally, your job description is kind of your first pass at helping people understand the skill set that you're looking for and somebody who will be successful in the role if you
Do you
do it
ever
really
change
well.
the interviews that someone gets, like as you like learn more through the interview process? So maybe like you put in a different aptitude type interview or a test or coding thing?
Typically, we'll keep similar interviews, if not all the same interviews. But a thing that I've used in the past is if I have if I have a 4 interview loop,
Mm-hmm.
I will maybe take 2 of those interviews if I talk to a candidate where I'm like, I'm not sure based on my hiring manager interview, whether or not they're gonna like be what we're looking for in these skill sets. So let's do those first just to ease the burden on the hiring team, essentially.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
like because then we can and the interviewees themselves like I'll talk about respecting like interviewee time as well. So like if you know that there's a dependency on maybe like one topic, just give that first and then like check in and then schedule the rest of the interviews after that if you have like separate interview loops or
Also,
separate
so
interview
sorry,
loopings.
last one. Do you ever cancel an interview? Because, like, right, like, let's schedule you, say you schedule the whole loop and then someone does very terrible in interview one. Do you cancel or like pretend that maybe they can come back from it? Or maybe they can't come back
um
from it. I don't know.
it depends. It depends on if it's already scheduled and how close out it's scheduled. Um, like again, it's a respect thing from my side of things. If you're like scheduled later that day or like the following day for another one, um, and something didn't go well, um, I think typically we'll just do them anyways. And I would say that my concern around that would be pretty rare because typically it's great to get more information, especially if somebody's in like the final loop. Like usually, like there's something there, right? You're pretty close, and so you're just getting more information at that point, and um, you know, you might be a great fit for another role or like a down level or something like that, right? Like
Oh, that
it
makes sense.
it might depend. And so like it's pretty rare where it's like a really really hard no, at least from my perspective. Unless somebody says something like completely off color or like culturally like inappropriate or something, which I have never experienced. But
Oh, nice.
um yeah, so like getting back to our interviews, like interviewers mental state, like if you are on the hiring team, so the hiring loop, so you have like you're an engineer on my team or another team and you're helping not helping, it's part of your job to interview, so you're interviewing as well. um it might be a long day. It might be that you were in an incident and you got paged and you have to go to an interview. Like you there might be like distractions that are just like happening in your daily work. And um that's important to just keep in mind. Like as an interviewer, like what do you need to like reset to come into an interview? Like and give your best to that interview. That's an important thing to acknowledge. And I think as an interviewee, it's another like I think it's important to be aware of these things, because like generally everyone's giving their time to make space for this interview, and I think like thankfulness on each side and understanding can go like a really long way in terms of like making a really positive experience for everybody. Um, all right, our interviewee. I'm going to go back to our poll. So, have you ever had a negative interviewing experience? So, over 50% were a yes, but it's much higher because we had cry in there too. So we've got about 30% no, I haven't had a negative experience, which is lovely. I love to hear that. But a majority of us have, and like we're the ones doing the interviews, right? So like that's why I want to talk. So like that's the thing, right? 71% of us have also conducted an interview. 29% of us haven't. But I'm willing to bet that at some point in your career you will. So as the interviewee, let's talk about what your goals are. Um, you're looking for a great job offer on a great team. Um, more than likely, right? You want to represent your experience in the interview. You want to answer the interviewer's questions well, not knowing the questions in advance, just knowing the general topics, right? So it's like classic, I'm going to study literally everything so that I'm ready for literally anything. And, that's just like a hard mental state to walk into, right? Like that can be challenging. Um, you want to assess the work culture. What's the environment like? What's the team like? What's the engineering manager like? These are all really important things, and you should definitely feel empowered to understand those and evaluate them and say no to an offer if you feel like you're nervous about it, or more likely ask more questions, ask questions afterwards, like if you get an offer, ask questions. Because the last thing you want is to walk into another situation, which is potentially like, a situation that you're leaving. Um, right. So understand the team's goals. Like, what are you going to be working on? What are the opportunities? Like, ideally, if you're walking into like the best interview, the best job, all those things, you're able to like understand like what's your opportunity? Like, what do you get to walk in and do? Like, what are you going to be doing a month in? Like, is it exciting to you? Does the team know? If they don't know, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's not great. Um, all right. What's the emotional state and like things that might be like in the interviewee's head, right? Okay, so you have just spent a ton of time researching this very specific role for a very specific company. You're probably excited about it, but either way, you have to be excited about it and talk about why you're excited about this organization. So you're doing like one-time research specifically for this job and probably a whole bunch of others that you might be interviewing for at the same time if you're like going on a if you're like you're fully into the interview process and like are out of work currently or things like that, right? Um, you've worked on your resume. I'm sure you've like toiled over it. You've probably tuned it specifically for this organization. You've probably written a cover letter specifically for this organization. You've prepared for all possible questions potentially with all of the examples of work that you've done. If you don't have experience, you're probably nervous about the fact that you can't talk about direct experience that you have. So maybe you're pulling from school or other projects that you've worked on, or you're like practicing things. Maybe you're burned out at your current job. That's why you're looking. And it's like you're in a really tough mental state because you've got a burnout job and you're interviewing and doing all of the things above that I talked about. Maybe you're unemployed. And so you're like super stressed out because there's bills to pay, or you've been unemployed for a while and like it's just feels really scary to not know where you're going next, right? So you've got all of this potentially in your head or other things. And like that just puts all this weight on this one conversation in this interview, right? Um, and that can also make it tough to be like, well, I should protect myself too and ask all these like appropriate questions to make sure I don't get into a sticky situation again. Um, so that all could be. Maybe you're just having a great time and it's fine. And like you're just like picking up interviews as you go and like it's totally fine. Like that's lovely. And I think that's important to call out because that's where your headspace should try to get to because you're gonna be able to like respond the best if you're just like, hey, I'm like excited to hear about this role. All right, so we did all of that. We've got our two people, and they walk into this interview. Here they are. Congrats, you both just met a cool person. Um, I love that Ted Lasso quote. Um, and I think it's important. Like, if you can push away all the other stuff around this, and just have a good conversation with an interesting person in the industry on either side. You're gonna have a good conversation. You're gonna build like a relationship with this person. Um, and that's a great spot to be. Let's talk about like the interview itself and some of the like weirdness about this meeting that we have. So there is a power imbalance out of the gate. So we walk in, nothing has been said. There is a power imbalance. So one person is seeking a job, one person is looking for an employee. All the decision making power right now is on the interviewer side of the table. Um, and like a lot of that is like I think felt coming into the interview as an interviewee, unless you're in like a super healthy mental state and you don't have all of these other things kind of weighing you down. The investment level pretty heavy on the interviewee side, so there's another imbalance there. You've got all of this work built up towards this conversation that you get to have for like a really short period of time when you think about it. Um, and then you've got all these unknowns right now, like at the beginning of the interview. What's this going to be like? What's this person going to be like? Are they going to be a jerk? Like, uh, am I going to walk out of this like feeling down for like the next 3 hours to a day to a week? Or am I going to have a great time and meet a really cool person? Right. So there's all these unknowns. All right. Interviewers understand all of that and immediately go to work trying to get rid of that. So like first things first, addressing power imbalance. Bring a positive tone, bring energy, be engaged, be curious throughout the interview. Like start it off being thankful.
Mhm.
I am thankful for your time and I understand all of the work that went into this. And I'm excited to talk to you and hear about your background. Truly, I truly am. And be understanding and be supportive and be open about that. Hey, interviews are tough. I'm here to like, or that like it's a weird situation, right? Like you can just be completely transparent and say, like, here's what we're here to talk about today. Here's what I'm looking to understand. I'm not trying to like, I don't usually say this, but like, I'm not trying to trick you, right? Like, I'm not trying to catch you on anything. I am truly interested in your background. If it's a hiring manager interview, I have some other goals. Like, I want you to understand like my management style. I want you to kind of get me coming through in the interview because like your manager matters a lot in your like honestly in your life. Like it has a big impact on your as your life and a whole as a whole, right? Like if you have a negative manager, it can wear you down pretty bad, like
Yeah, people
outside of
don't
work.
quit jobs, they quit bosses.
Yeah, that's super true. And they'll stay around for like a really good leader to work with, somebody that actually cares. So like bringing that, like bring that in if you're ever in the position of being a hiring manager and helping them understand, because you also don't want somebody to come in who doesn't like your leadership style and it's not going to work out. So that's part of the fit thing. We want it to be like a great fit, and that's you know the ball is in both sides of the court on that one. And so like again, um, as an interviewee, feel empowered to like ask those questions, seek out that understanding. It also comes across really well if you're like thinking about those things,
How do
because that's
you
something I'm interested in.
how do you on both sides of things? I feel like people are always on their best behavior and saying like what they think they should say, especially in an interview. So like how do you kind of cut through that and figure out like if the interviewer is like the hiring manager is someone like you actually would want to work for and you can trust what they're saying, and then vice versa if like the interviewee is actually, embodies the things that they're saying.
Hmm. I think part of it is starting off super open. Um, build trust as fast as you can, basically. And so like a lot of intro can help with that. And so like not a lot of not a expounding intro, but like some of these things like walking in, knowing how you want to like address the person and um you know ask how their name is pronounced if you don't know, like uh ask anything up front um to just genuinely show that you're respectful and you're building trust in those things and be open about like this is what I'm like this is the information I'm looking for and things like that. And if you're in the interview the more specific interview loops where you've got like specific questions that we want to ask everybody. Um, Being conversational in that, right? You ask the question, but help the interviewee, not like with answers, but like, oh, I don't know, like if I have that exact experience, but I have this other thing that's close. Oh, yeah. Well, here's what I'm trying to understand with this
Oh, okay.
question. So, like XYZ, right? And on the interviewee side, um, be uh be honest and like be a little bit vulnerable and don't be afraid to say like I don't know or I don't have that experience, but here's like what like here is an experience that I had and that I'm thinking of or something like that. Um there is and I've seen this happen more than one time. There is being too polished where interviewers will be like, wow, they answered everything really great,
Right.
but it just didn't feel right. Like I don't like there's an element of mistrusting too much polish, which is super weird to say, but um it's true. So like that's where I don't want to tell folks to not be polished, but I think like approach it like a real conversation, right? Like you're talking to a colleague is my best advice for everybody on both sides of the conversation, essentially. Um, Again, because you will be like they one of the people you talk to will be your colleague, and like treat them like that. And if they won't be, treat them how you treat your colleagues, because uh, having bad experiences in interviews is rough. It's like it's emotionally draining for folks, and it's for, like very like my opinion on this, it's super disrespectful, especially given the amount of effort folks put into the interview process. And so if you're not respectful of that, then it's not a really good look for you or the organization. So yeah, so everybody be honest on both sides. It's it's something that takes practice. I think if you're not like a super conversational person or what have you, but I do think it's still important for you to like if you have an opportunity to be involved in the interviewing process and to work on those things. So let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah, okay. So addressing power imbalance, like I think that's all tone and like try and like bring it more even as quickly as you can. And like I often will say things along the lines of like, let's or like I'm part of this is to, you know, um we're asking these questions to understand if this is a good fit for both of us, right? Like it's a good mutual fit. And we're gonna figure that out together. And during the question answering process, the thing that I will do a lot, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is like talking answers back to people and making sure that I have that right and like giving them an opportunity to say more about something. And then I'll also say like, well, that's really great. That would work really well because we have this thing going on. Like this is what we're doing. And I really like that you have that experience. And just giving positive feedback and being super open about it, right? Like if I really think that, like, oh wow, I think that you have great experience that fits really well, like based on this question. Cool. Like, all right, let's move on to the next question. It's just be open. So addressing interview unknowns. So I did talk about this a little bit already, which is like review the purpose of the interview and what you're looking for. Like what are your questions, and like be open about like explaining the questions and like the things that you're interested in hearing about. Again, you're not giving answers or like helping too much, especially if it's like a pair programming interview or something like that. There's a tack around like get folks unstuck through the stuff you don't care about. But you know, kind of encourage them to solve the things that you do care about. And then like if somebody gets stuck, like getting them through it and then on to the next thing and like kind of reset. And you can kind of measure along the way as best as you can. Like all these measurements are really imperfect and really hard. Um, but you know, it's what we've got. Um, yeah. All right. I talked about like repeating what you heard in the interviewee say and whatnot. I've that takes practice. It also gives you a chance to kind of write down what they said. It gives you a little breaks to collect information and whatnot, which is really important kind of afterwards. Okay, so I'm the interviewee. What are your strategies? Um, they're exactly the same when it comes to the power imbalance. Uh, have a positive tone, have energy, be engaged, be curious about the organization, be honest, be truthful. Like you've had to like maybe research the organization. Like maybe you're not super excited about it. Like, I don't know, it's like a paper company or something, you know, like and
No offense
whatever,
to
but like
anyone who works
find
at a
things that are
paper
interesting if
company.
you're not so like, yeah, sorry if you work for a paper company. It was just I thought Dunder Mifflin, and that was it.
That's where my
Um,
head went too. I liked it.
but yeah, like this is to me, it's just like be a person. Like it goes a long way. Like break through those nerves. You're gonna be nervous. Your body is just gonna like. I mean, there are like chemical things that are like going to like be there because of all the like potential stress around it. And so like engage like early and try and like work through some of that stuff and like get in your groove with the conversation. And ask questions. Like bring the power back in your court. Ask questions. And that's really helpful. Um, dealing with interview unknowns, ask for clarity. I don't understand that question. Could you like like talk me through it again, or like, is this what you're looking to like get at? Things like that, right? Also, um, and this is a thing that like depending on your personality, you might be prone to do, especially if you're nervous at the beginning of an interview. And especially if you're given an open ended question of like, tell me about your background, you might just go time box yourself. Like, there's most of what folks say is like definitely interesting. And I like could talk to you for a full hour about your background, but you only have so much time. So you want to make sure that like say some stuff and then check, like, make sure you're checking in with the interviewer because there might be some like, that's great. I got what I need. Let's progress.
What's kind of the most important things that you are looking for in like that personal narrative portion of the interview?
I use the personal narrative portion of the interview to give myself content to reach to for questions and like um, to like help the interviewee, if you will. So if I'm the interviewer, what am I looking for? I'm honestly looking for like what is the most clear, like where are your clear examples going to come from? Like probably your recent history. So you talk about like they're talking about that. And then when I'm asking a question, I will relate it to their history potentially and say like that, like at this role, like did you ever have that experience, or maybe a different role, but just to like give help people, like it's helpful to like cue people with a trigger so that it's like instead of like drawing a mind blank, you can help folks through that by prompting, and just getting ahead of that. And so like background really helps me when I'm interviewing so that I can like have a more conversational interview rather than just like going through questions and then like writing down an answer and like
Okay. I
being
love that answer because I've actually always wondered, like, what is one looking for during that? Like, what's like, how long should you talk? So it's good to know that you're actually listening to that and using that for the rest of the interview.
Yeah. So if you're an interviewee, think about the things you want to talk about. Like, what is the history that you're going to be drawing from, and like share that stuff and like share the stuff that's probably relevant to the role or the interview itself. Because like that's all this brand new person knows about you right now. And so it can just be helpful for like conversation generating and make this like turn it more into a more natural conversation by the end, um, which I think is great. Um, Share examples. Like, don't do hypotheticals. This is super hard. It takes prep. It takes experience too. But like, if you can talk about examples in your history of things and like if there is things to prep, I encourage folks to prep this. Like, prepare like examples of things that you've worked on in your past for you to draw on that are in like you can go ahead and do like the star method. If you're not familiar with that, it's like situation, task, which those two are like super blended for me. Situation, task, action, and then super critical is result. So, like, what was the outcome of all of the things that you did? Um, and those things are like where you can really drive home like your points as an interviewee. And as an interviewer, um, don't be shy to say like, hey, it's really helpful if you like frame your answers in this way. And also like don't feel bad about this, but I'm like, if you, I'll bring you back to that format with a question, and I might have a follow up question if like, oh, what was the result of that? Like, that was really cool. Like, how did that turn out? Because like when you get going, sometimes you just like forget to be like, oh yeah, and like, um, the company made $3 million, something like that.
So you mentioned to avoid hypotheticals. A lot of the coding with Kelly community is like breaking into tech. This is their first role. So if you're asked about an experience and you don't have an experience with that, do you just say, I don't have an experience with that? Or can you say, I don't have an experience that, but like, if I did, this is what I would do? What's the best way to approach that?
I would ask. I don't have direct experience with that. I'm really new. I'm looking for my first job, as you know, maybe already. Um, but I would be more than happy to talk about how I would approach that. Also, I like learned about this in school. I could talk about like what I learned and whatnot. Like I would ask,
Okay, I love
essentially,
that.
like, um, and then and then you'll get feedback. Like, yeah, that's fine. Like, here's what I'm looking for. I'd be curious how you'd approach that or something like that. And then that's fine, right? Because it fits in with like, ideally, it fits in with everything else. So, like, we have a 4 interview set for like our final loop, and there's a lot of different topics going on there, and like maybe you've got experience on like a few of them, right? And like you say you kill 2 of the interviews. It's like sweet, knock it out of the park. You've got all the experience. It's a great fit. But one, you're like, oh, I don't have examples of that. But and like as an interview team, we're like, oh, they didn't have examples of that, but like they know what's up. Like they talked about how they would approach it. So I think they'd be fine like in this like entry level role. Like they would need mentor. That's another thing, right? Like, oh, they know they've got it, but they need mentorship. So we got to make sure we have somebody available for that. Can we do that? Like if we bring them in,
Hmm.
like, can we support them? No, I don't think with everything else going on, we could support them. Oh, gee, they were really great though. Like those conversations happen. And then you get an email that's like, sorry, right? Like you, I share that because you don't know all of the things that are like happening behind the scenes. And it
Had
kind of,
to,
it feels bad when you get a rejection, but like there's
yeah.
probably a lot of positivity going all around. Like, um, in conversations about like evaluating if you'd be
Would
the
you
right fit for them.
recommend reaching out for feedback on how you did or in that situation, or kind of just assume best intentions and roll with it?
If you're going to use it,
Okay.
if you really want feedback and you're going to use it, I encourage, well, I mean, like everybody's different, but like I would encourage reaching out. You can always reach out to the recruiter. Reach out to the recruiter and they can sync you up or get feedback from anyone on the team. And then like, or the hiring manager can pull it together for you. Um, yeah, so be ready for it. And like, if you want it to use that feedback, definitely, definitely ask for it. Um, but again, I think the feedback that you might be thinking you would get might not be the thing. Like it, a lot of situations for me is like you weren't like honestly you weren't the right fit for the role, so like I can't really give you feedback. You're great, like, but you didn't have these things that we're looking for. Or it's like you've got this other experience that's like probably great for these other roles but not for this one. Or like, I know you're trying to break into the stuff that we're doing, and I totally respect that, but it's not, that doesn't work for us right now. I've definitely hired folks where I'm like, oh, they don't have this experience, but they're going to be really great when they come in and we have time to help them with that. Right. But that might not be the situation. So, like, I think more often than not, it's like, it's not a great fit. Like going and studying isn't going to be the fix. And it's probably not that you like blew the something of the interview, like you failed to represent yourself well or something like that, right? Like um it's probably more just like, again, it's just not a, it's not a great fit. So I've gone the path of like, for myself, just being okay with it. It's like, oh, it's a, like I know how this goes. It's hard. Like it's hard to pick folks, and often it's like really tight, and it's like, oh, like this person's edging them out, and because of these things, I think that would work well for us, or something like that. So I would say like, just assume you're cool. Like, like
I love that.
it's
Okay.
fine. You just gotta do a lot of interviews and like, I mean, I've got friends in lots of like high level, I have like principal engineer friends who are going and interviewing and they're like, that was a terrible experience. Like, and like they just ghosted me after X and whatever. It's like they are phenomenal and super talented and like have no reason to feel bad about that. I encourage you, if you ever get ghosted or like a rejection that doesn't come with like anything positive, to assume that you dodged one. Like
Oh, I love
it's
that
a
too.
two-way
Yeah.
street, right? Like you don't want it, and that this is also true of if like places that have like really bad hiring practices. Um, if the hiring process is not good, like there are probably other like business related things that are not great. And if the hiring manager is like rude or other things, like it's probably not great. And so I encourage folks to really think about it as that fit aspect on both sides and kind of take some of that power back, in that like you don't want to go work for a company that's a mess, and is going to be stressful, or things like that. And so um, yeah, I generally avoid feedback unless there's something like really specific that would be super helpful for you, in which case you're going to know what that is, I think. That's all my slides. Treat every interview like you're talking to a team member.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Doug. Let's open the floor for questions, and many apologies that I have asked all of them. So if anybody else has questions, go for it. Otherwise, I will keep going.
Hi, Doug. My name is Jay. I just want to know. I heard that the federal bank have lowered the interest rate, which means investors and company can now borrow more money. Uh, so which means company may potentially hire more software developers. So can you confirm if this is true?
I have no idea. It totally depends. Like, um, I would say even if there are outside influences, for folks, like it depends on the industry. There's all kinds of things that go into it, like election year things. Like some companies will be more conservative and whatnot. Like, um, I would encourage folks to um, kind of just ignore it and like look what's out there and see what's coming and what's available in terms of like jobs that are posted, um, and work on building a network in slow times and whatnot. But yeah, as in terms of like outside influences, like I don't see a lot of those from my position. It kind of depends on internal like influences more than other things that I've seen.
I see. Thank you. Thank you for
Mm.
answering.
Yeah.
I have a question. Um, could you please tell us how to prepare for the interview, not from the technical side, but more from the psychological side, how to prepare mentally to maybe feel better on the interview?
Hmm. I think one thing is if you've built like confidence in the things that you're like you have available to talk about, like get your kind of preparation together in terms of like experiences that you've had or experiences in like again, if you're trying to break into the industry, experiences in like school or like projects that you've worked on, and then like if you're switching industries, you can pull from like experiences in the past too, like from past roles in like a different industry. So like build up that preparation, I think can build a lot of confidence, right? And so like then on top of that, like confidence experience that you can pull from, um, I always take interviews standing up. Like I always conduct interviews like this. Like I have to be able to move my body. And so like if I'm nervous, like moving helps like get that like the chemicals out and moving and whatnot and like can um help me a lot, especially if you're like prone to like a shaky voice or something like other like physiological things that happen when we get nervous and whatnot. Also like I think I'm gonna go back to like honesty too. If you can be like comfortable saying like, hey, like I'm super excited to be here. I am nervous, like like or whatever it is, right? Like I think that is 100% okay to say, and often helpful if you're feeling that way, because then um like it makes you feel more comfortable when you're feeling that nervous energy or whatever it is as you're answering a question. And like as an interviewer, then I have a cue to be like it's cool, take your time, like you can restart, like change your answer, like whatever that may be. And so like I think being okay, being open about those things, but then yeah, like beforehand just making sure that like your space is how you want it, you've got everything like kind of prepared. I think being prepared helps. And then like If you can stand up, great. If you can't stand up during your interview, or you're like going in for an interview or something like that, just move. I think that can help. But yeah, like find the things that like work for you to kind of bring balance, and try and pull those in before your interview.
Thanks. I think we have time for one more question. Who's ready?
If I can ask one more question, if they ask you for some technology that you know just, I don't know, just a little bit, and you don't know the like exact answer, is it better to say I don't know, or is it better to start mumbling something and trying to say something?
Great question. I will always encourage you to say I don't know, or like I don't have a lot of experience with that. And if you are like, if there is a related technology, you could say, I do have experience with this if you'd like me to talk about that thing. And so I think just being upfront with like, I don't have that experience, or I don't have a lot of knowledge of that currently. I think for you, if you're getting those questions and the interviewer is not is like, wow, we really is like very specific about a certain technology, if it's super relevant to the role, I think that's important to know. If they're I always watch out for places that are really specific technology heavy and aren't willing to look for folks who have related experience and like a proven track record of learning. I think this is becoming like, I think it's less common that folks are looking for really like specific technologies, but that would be something to like ask a question about, or be open about as well. Like if they ask you that and be like, I don't have that experience, I think it's fair to ask like, is that specific technology like really important to this role, and is it really important for somebody to have direct experience with that? I think that's a really good question for yourself to ask, to understand as well. And again, it's like an organization scare for me if they're like, well, we need somebody that already has the experience and like doesn't like, and we can't teach you like that. That would worry me. Like, so I think the question is really good because you get a lot of good information back too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yay. Well, this was great, Doug. Thanks so much for coming and preparing this on such short notice. It didn't seem like you rushed it at all. It seemed like you had
Lovely.
it ready for months.
I talked way longer than I thought I would, which is thanks for your
It's probably because
questions,
you had
Callie.
someone interrupting you every like 3 minutes.
Well, yeah, that's good. I appreciate it.
So before we go, do you have anything that you would like to plug? Maybe some sauces or something?
Oh goodness, yeah, I do own a business. If you like hot sauce and you like mild green hot sauce, go to freshwatersauces.com and you can buy some of the hot sauce that I make.
Nice.
But I care more about you all like feeling great walking into interviews, and if you are interviewers, to like be thoughtful and make our industry better and not have stupid leak code interviews and things like that. I said it.
Are you okay with people reaching out to you on LinkedIn with any further questions or to chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, feel free.
Perfect. I will post your LinkedIn and your sauce company in the Coding with Callie Slack, just in case, we might have some hot sauce fanatics here. And yeah, thank you again. And thank you everybody for joining. I will see everyone next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for some live coding.
Thanks for the presentation, Doug.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks everybody for coming.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
See ya.